Hi guys, story time. So I'm going to tell you a story about a miracle that happened to me. And to be honest, nothing like it had ever happened to me before, and really nothing like it has ever happened since. So it was 1999 and I was 21 years old. You can do the math. And I found myself on a plane traveling from London to a large city in Kazakhstan, which is in Central Asia. And it was just 8 years after the fall of communism. Kazakhstan used to be part of the USSR. And when the wall came down, they all of a sudden found themselves an independent nation. But it had only been 8 years. And it was a nation that was in a lot of turmoil. And quite honestly, they didn't know how to move forward. And communism still had a pretty strong hold. And I'd been going to a discipleship training school as part of YWAM. And I'd been doing training in London, or in the London area, for about 3 months. And we were on our way to spend 3 months in Kazakhstan for our outreach portion. And our goal while we were in the country was just to love on people. We were going to help teach English. English, now all of a sudden the West was open to people in Kazakhstan and the former Soviet Union. And so they were all just so hungry for anything from the Western world, whether it was magazines or media or in a lot of cases, meeting an actual Westerner was a really big deal. And so we were hoping to go into the country and teach English and love on people and do it all in the name of Jesus, even though we had to be careful about that. So what I mean by that is, even though in theory communism had fallen, there still was not complete freedom of religion. It was actually against the law to be found proselytizing. So in other words, you are a member of some particular faith and you're trying to evangelize someone else in the country and you're trying to get them to believe what you believe. Well, that was illegal. And in addition to that, we were warned that the KGB, the secret police of the Soviet Union, were still very much alive and well. And they were always listening. There were bugs everywhere. They had agents everywhere, and they did not like religion. And so we were warned before we ever went into the country that we had to be really careful about talking about God. We had to make sure, quite honestly, that we didn't even say God's name. Even if we were praying, we were not to bow our heads or close our eyes. So we arranged in advance that we would call God our dad or our daddy. That was kind of our code word for him. And even if we were going to pray, we had to be really conversational about it. It could not be an obvious thing, even if we thought we were alone. And so before we left England, we were prepped on what our travel situation was going to be like. There had recently been a bombing and specific threats against Americans in the airport that we had originally planned to fly into. The town we were going to was only a couple of hours from this airport. And I'm being intentionally vague about city names here, just to continue to protect any missionaries or believers in that area. So anyway, there had recently been a bombing and threats against Americans, and so we had to alter our plans and fly into another town in Kazakhstan that was a long ways away from our ultimate destination. We were going to kind of a small town. This town was a 16-hour train ride away. So after flying for who knows how many hours to get from England to Kazakhstan, we then needed to board a train and ride that for 16 hours. It was going to go overnight. It was from like 6 p.m. till 9 or 10 the next morning. And so we left England with its cold, rainy, foggy weather. And we found ourselves landing in Kazakhstan, part of the former USSR. And it was very gray everywhere we looked. Everything was, cement and, just apartment buildings and people with very serious looks on their faces, very unhappy looking. But it was very warm and muggy. And so we made our way with a lot of difficulty to the train station. And oh man, we had some language lessons before we left England, but it was like conversational. Half of us had taken some conversational Russian, and half of us had taken some conversational Kazakh. But none of that prepared us for getting to a train station where the signs were only in Russian or Chinese. So we, with great difficulty, thank God, this is the first of many miracles that we experienced on that trip, but thank God we managed to find the train that was going the right direction, because our choices were either Moscow or China, and neither of those were places that we wanted to go. So anyway, thank goodness. So we get on this train, and we had been warned in advance that not very many women travel on these trains. The reason for that is most of the men can't afford a stateroom. So that's just a little itty bitty cabin. So they'll just ride in the hallway, and they bring their vodka on with them, and they just start drinking when the train leaves the station. And that's what they do the entire ride. That's just how they pass their time. And women do not travel unaccompanied on these trains unless they're prostitutes. And so we were warned that there was 8 of us on our team, and we were all ranging in age from like 19 to 21. No men on our team. It was just us 8 Western girls. We had a few Brits and a Norwegian and several Americans. And so we were warned that we needed to stick together, us girls, and that we should pretty much at the start of the ride, we needed to get into our cabins and stay there. And so we did just that. As we boarded onto the train, it was so hot. It was so stuffy. The hallway was very skinny, and the hallway was just lined with men. And as we walked down this hall, oh my goodness, I'm pretty sure these men thought that they had hit the lottery, because a lot of them had never even seen a Westerner before. A lot of them had never even seen or met an American or a Brit. And so they thought it was their lucky day. And women are not respected in that culture like they are in many others. And women are kind of seen as like property of men. So as we're trying to get down this hallway, not only are the men not stepping aside to get out of our way, but they are, pinching our bottoms. They are patting us. They are groping us. They are saying all kinds of, I'm sure, inappropriate things. Thank goodness we couldn't really speak the language, but you kind of got the impression of, what they were saying. And the whole thing was just kind of mortifying and intimidating. So we made our way to our cabins, and it was just kind of a whole new world for most of us. A couple of the girls on our team, our leaders, had been to Kazakhstan before, but the other 6 of us had not. So we'd been told that you could find hot water on the train, and some of us had brought like cup of noodles for our dinner and granola bars and stuff like that. And so at one point we decided that we were going to go looking for hot water, and we brought our little guidebook, our little Russian guidebook. And 3 separate times We had 4 girls in each stateroom, so we had 2 cabins next to each other, 4 girls in each one. And in my cabin, 3 separate times, different combinations of us would go out looking for hot water. And every time we would go out, the men just went nuts. And oh man, their hands were all over us. And they were pretty excited. And, really, they hadn't even been drinking that long yet. And so the language barrier was a real problem. And it seemed like we just got laughed at, as we were legitimately trying, but I'm sure butchering the language. And so finally, after the 3rd time, we got back to the cabin, and we just said, I don't think we should leave the cabin again tonight, because those guys are getting drunk, they're getting rowdy, and I think we just need to stay here. And so we closed our door, locked it. Probably about 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night, we locked the door. And we could hear the men in the hall just getting drunker and getting noisier and getting rowdier. And they knew we were in our cabin. And so at first, on occasion, they would knock on our door and call out to us. But then over time, as they got drunker, pretty soon they were banging on our door occasionally and yelling, wanting us to come out. And we would even see them trying the handle. We had locked the door. It was a flimsy little door, but we'd locked it. But we could see that they were trying the handle, trying to get into the cabin. And so we just determined, we are staying here all night. We are not leaving. It was really scary. And so we all, probably about 9 o'clock, got into our very stifling hot bunks and pretended to sleep, basically. We all just put in our music and our headphones, or just kind of laid there and, tried to sleep, but really just kind of tossed and turned. And for probably 2 hours, I had the terrible feeling that I needed to go to the bathroom. But with those men out in the hallway, I was just like, no, there's no way. I'm not leaving this cabin. So I prayed multiple times that God would make it so that I didn't have to go. He would work a miracle in my bladder. That is not the miracle I'm talking about today, because that did not happen. And it just got so bad that pretty soon I had to wake up the other girls in the cabin. And that was our agreement. We had planned in advance that if for any reason anybody needed to leave the cabin, we needed to wake each other up, because there was no way we wanted just one of us to go out by themselves. So I'm like, I'm so sorry, you guys, but I really have to go to the bathroom. And of course, they're all just laying there wide awake. And a couple of the other girls said, you know what, I have to go too. And so we worked out this whole plan that 3 of us would leave the cabin while the 4th one stayed and locked the door behind us. And 3 of us would go, so that as one person would use the bathroom, the other 2 girls could wait together for her out in the hall, and no one of us would ever be alone out in the hall with these men. And because by now, it's 11 o'clock at night, and these guys are having just a rowdy party, And we'd been warned that that it was pretty common. One of the reasons that women didn't travel alone on the train was that the men would get so drunk that they, that rape was a pretty common thing. So with all of that in mind, here we are. We need to leave the cabin, and the men have already been trying to get to us, and it felt like we were getting ready to feed ourselves to the wolves. So So we just came up with all these strategies in our mind. Oh my word, it was so hot, but we were like, well, maybe if we put lots of layers on, it'll make us less attractive. And, there'll be more padding, so that when they're groping us and stuff, it's like they're just getting more fabric instead of, which is funny, but we were grasping at straws and just trying to do whatever we could. And so we did that, we put on our warm clothes and finally we'd done everything we could to put it off, but it was time to go. And so we sat down for a second and they said, Courtney, why don't you, let's talk to our dad about this. I was like, okay, let's do it. So I just said, well, Dad, we're your girls and we need your help. And I said, I just ask that you would send your angels to help us out and that you'd make them look like big, scary men and that you'd put them in front of us and to the sides of us and behind us and that you'd just protect us as we leave our cabin and go down to the bathroom. And pretty soon, I tried to drag the prayer out as long as I possibly could, but pretty soon it was time to open the door. And as I'm praying, we could see them trying the door and trying to get in. We could see the handle, moving, and they're banging on the door and they're calling out to us. And so I'm just thinking, why on earth did I get chosen to be the one to open the door? But whatever. So finally, I just quickly, and my heart is pounding out of my chest and my knees are shaking. I'm just trembling, but I unlock the door and I push down the handle, I swing it open and I step out into the hall. And in that instant, the hallway was empty. There was suddenly not a person in sight. So we didn't take very long to think about this. The three of us ran down the hall to the little bathroom. And my friend Jane stayed back in the cabin and locked the door behind us. And each one of us was able to use the bathroom with no problems. And finally, as my friend was using the bathroom, the last one of us, a couple of men came out into the hall and they just stood with their arms folded, kind of blocking our path back. So in my head, I just was like, Daddy, just make them move in Jesus' name. Just get them out of the way. And the next time I looked back their direction, they were gone. They'd gone back into their cabin or whatever. And so when we were done, man, we just booked it. We just ran back down the hall. And then we realized, oh my gosh, we don't know which cabin is ours. All the cabin doors were closed all down the hall and they all looked the same to us. And we didn't know the number or anything. And so again, we were just like, Daddy, please help us find the right room. And so we picked one and we did our secret knock, which we had already worked out in advance. And sure enough, there's my friend Jane, and she opens the door and we get back in there. And we get back in and we start talking with Jane about what had happened. And she's like, you guys, it's the weirdest thing. She said, the whole time you guys were gone, it was so quiet in the hallway. And we were like, we know there was no one in the hall. Like the instant we stepped out and the instant we came back into the cabin, we locked the door. We heard all the men come back out into the hall. And we just sat there just stunned, and we were like, oh my word, our dad is totally taking care of us, you guys. Like, this is amazing. We have no reason to be afraid in this country and for the next 3 months of outreach, because our dad's got us. Like, he is amazing. And so we all got back into our bunks. And in the meantime, the guys are still out there. They're still noisy, drunk, rowdy. They're still trying our door handle. And we all get back in our beds. And about 2 hours later, my friend Jane, the one girl that hadn't gone to the bathroom the first time, she wakes us all up. And of course, she is so sorry and so apologetic, but she's got to use the restroom now. So at this point, I was like, well, we know the drill. Let's do this thing. So we put all of our layers back on again, got all padded up. We sat down and we talked to our dad. And we just said, thank you, Dad, so much for the way that you watched over us and you protected us last time we did this. And so we're just asking again, just send those angels again and just have them surround us. And then I was done praying. Again, adrenaline and knees knocking, but my faith had just gone up so many notches after what had happened earlier. And so I unlocked the door and I pushed down the handle, I swung it open, and I stepped out into the hall. And all of a sudden, looking up and down the hall, the entire hall was lined with women. Kazakh women with their baskets, like they were getting ready to go to market, looking bored, pretty much ignoring us for the most part. And we were able to just run down the hall through all of these beautiful women, use the restroom again, completely unchallenged. No one touched us, no one groped us, no one shouted us, no one hardly even looked at us. Ran back to our cabin, got back inside, closed and locked the door, and this time just thanked our dad again. You are amazing. This is amazing. Thank you so much, Dad. So at this point, we all go back to sleep. And the next morning, when we finally arrive to our destination, we all, thank goodness, get off that train and we pile into taxis. And I got into a taxi with my friend Natasha, who was actually staying in the cabin next to ours that night. And she and the other 3 girls in her cabin had not had any of the issues we had had. None of them. But she said, I'm so glad you told me about what happened, because she said, I woke up at 11 o'clock and again at 1 a.m. and I knew I had to pray for you guys. And I didn't know why, but I prayed for your protection. And wouldn't you know it, but 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. were the exact 2 times that we were leaving our cabin and going to use the restroom. And both times, our dad came through like crazy. And we knew, and we just walked in such confidence and courage the whole rest of our time in that country, even knowing that there were times where we had KGB officers that were following us and asking questions about us. And we had young men in cars who were following us and shouting at us and being inappropriate. Anyway, it didn't matter what we faced, because we knew that our dad was real and that he had our back and that he was sending his angels to watch over us and take care of us. So I hope you enjoyed today's story time. Stay tuned, because I'm going to tell you some more stories of real life miracles that I've witnessed and that have happened to me. Love you guys. Bye.